The night I realized my family had already decided my future without me started with a locked door. It was just after midnight when I tried to open the filing cabinet in my parents' house and found the key missing. That cabinet had always been there, tucked into the corner of my father's home office, a heavy oak thing that smelled like dust and lemon oil. Growing up, I was told it held important family papers, mortgages, insurance, old tax records, nothing I needed to worry about. Except that night I did. My name is Claire Whitman. I was 32 years old, standing barefoot on cold tile in the house I grew up in, holding a mug of tea that had already gone cold, staring at a cabinet I'd opened freely 100 times before. And for the first time, I couldn't. That was when I knew something had shifted. It hadn't started dramatically. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a small thing. The kind of thing you only recognize as important later, when you're replaying it in your head and wishing you'd paid attention sooner. 2 weeks earlier, my mother Evelyn had called me and asked if I could come home for a family discussion. She didn't say what about. She rarely did. In my family, details were shared on a need-to-know basis, and I was usually the last to need to know. I drove the 3 hours from Columbus to my parents' place in northern Ohio on a Sunday afternoon, the same drive I'd done dozens of times since college. Flat highways, cornfields, the same gas station I always stopped at near mile marker 143. Nothing felt unusual. I remember thinking I might stay the night, help my mom clean out the guest room before Thanksgiving. At that point, I still believed I belonged there. My parents' house was large, but not flashy. A 2-story colonial with white siding, dark shutters, and a long gravel driveway that curved past old maple trees. My father, Robert Whitman, had bought it 30 years earlier, back when his construction business started taking off. Whitman and Sons, though for most of my life, it had really been Whitman and Son. My older brother, Daniel was 4 years older than me, confident, loud, the kind of man who filled rooms just by walking into them. He'd joined the family business right after high school, learned it from my father, taken over most operations by the time he was 30. Everyone said it made sense. He was the heir, the legacy, the future. I was the other one, the daughter who went to college, got a degree in communications, moved to the city, worked in nonprofit administration. The one people described as independent in the way that meant optional. When I arrived that Sunday, Daniel's truck was already in the driveway. His wife, Marissa, was inside too, sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling on her phone, their 2 kids running through the house like it was theirs, which I realized later was the point. Dinner was polite, too polite. My mother kept asking if I was tired, if I wanted more potatoes, if work was still stressful. My father barely looked up from his plate. Daniel talked about a new equipment purchase, a warehouse expansion, a potential merger. Words like growth and scale and long-term vision floated around the table. No one asked about my life. After dinner, my mother suggested we all move into the living room. She sat on the couch next to my father. Daniel and Marissa took the armchairs. I sat on the edge of the love seat, feeling strangely like a guest in my own childhood home. That was when my father cleared his throat. "We've been doing some estate planning," he said. The word estate landed heavier than it should have. He continued, "Given the size of the business, now, it's important to have things structured properly. Clean, efficient." Daniel nodded, like he already knew all of this. Marissa didn't look up from her phone. My mother smiled at me, that careful smile she used when she was about to say something she hoped I wouldn't push back on. "We just want everyone to be taken care of." I waited. "We've decided," my father said, "that Daniel will assume full ownership of Whitman and Sons when I retire." I nodded slowly. I had always assumed that part, And the house my mother added quickly will remain with Daniel as well, since he's local and the grandchildren are already settled here. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't speak. We'll make sure you're remembered. Of course, my father said, waving a hand vaguely. There will be provisions. Provisions, not specifics, not numbers. Just a word meant to end the conversation. I asked one question. Have you already updated the will? The room went quiet. Daniel finally looked at me. His expression wasn't hostile. It was dismissive, like I'd asked something unnecessary. It's handled, he said. Dad's been working with a lawyer. My mother reached for my hand. Claire, you don't need to worry about these things. Daniel will do the right thing. That was the moment, though I didn't know it yet, when I was officially excluded. Not yelled at, not disowned, just quietly moved out of the center of the picture. I stayed the night. I told myself I was being dramatic, that families worked this way, that I didn't want the house or the business anyway. But something felt wrong. The next morning, while everyone was out back with the kids, I went into my father's office. I'd been in there 1,000 times. Used the printer, sorted paperwork, grabbed pens from his desk. I opened the filing cabinet to look for the old insurance documents my mother had once asked me to digitize. That's when I found it locked. No key in the drawer, no key on the hook where it always hung. Just a smooth metal lock, and my reflection staring back at me. I didn't say anything. I closed the drawer carefully, like it might accuse me if I made noise. That night, back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about words they'd used. Structured, efficient, handled, and the way no one had asked what I wanted. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone to complain. I did what I'd always done in my life when something felt off. I paid attention, because somewhere, between that locked cabinet and my mother's practiced smile, I realized something unsettling. Whatever love I thought existed in my family had always come with conditions, and I had just crossed a line where I no longer fit their plans. I didn't know it yet, but that was only the beginning. I didn't confront anyone after that weekend. I didn't call my parents to ask why the cabinet was locked or what exactly provisions meant. I didn't text Daniel or Marissa. Silence had always been safer in my family. Silence kept things smooth. And for most of my life, I'd learned that smooth was rewarded more than honest. But silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means things are moving without you. 2 weeks passed. Then, 3. Thanksgiving came and went. I drove back again, because that's what I'd always done. Show up. Be pleasant. Don't rock the boat. The house was full of noise. Football on the TV, kids yelling Marissa's mother, criticizing the stuffing. Everything looked normal. That made it worse. At dinner, Daniel made a toast. To family, he said, lifting his glass. And to the future. Everyone clinked glasses. I did too, because not doing it would have made me visible in a way I wasn't ready for yet. After dessert, my father pulled Daniel aside into the office. The door closed. I watched it happen from the kitchen sink while I rinsed plates no one had asked me to wash. My mother noticed me watching. They're just discussing some paperwork, she said quickly. Nothing you need to worry about. That phrase again. I smiled and nodded. Inside, something hardened. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I lay awake in my old room, staring at the ceiling fan. I remembered being 17, sitting in the same room, listening to my parents argue quietly downstairs about money, about the business, about risk. Even then, I'd known the business came first. It always had. The next morning, I left early. No one stopped me. No one asked when I'd be back. On the drive home, I made a decision that felt small at the time. I would stop assuming I knew my place in my family and start finding out where I actually stood. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. Not a dramatic one. Not a confrontation, just information. Her name was Linda Perez. She specialized in estate planning and family-owned businesses. Her voice was calm, precise. She didn't interrupt when I explained my situation. "I'm not trying to contest anything," I said. "I just want to understand my rights." "That's usually how it starts," she replied. Not unkindly. She explained that if my parents were alive and competent, they could structure their will however they wanted. Favoritism wasn't illegal. Exclusion wasn't illegal. Silence, however, was strategic. "If you're not being shown documents," Linda said, "it usually means decisions have already been made." I asked one more question. "What about assets tied to the business?" "Family trusts, shared property." "That depends," she said. "And you won't know unless you see the paperwork." Which I couldn't, not without a key. December came. Christmas followed. I flew in this time instead of driving. Shorter stay, I told myself. Less emotional investment. Christmas morning was efficient. Gifts opened in a neat sequence. The kids got everything they'd circled in catalogs. Daniel received a new watch from my parents. Engraved. Something about legacy. I got a scarf. It was nice, soft, expensive enough to show effort, thoughtful enough to deflect guilt. But when Daniel opened a slim envelope and smiled in a way that felt private, something in me went cold. Later, while everyone was distracted with wrapping paper and coffee refills, I saw him slip that envelope into his coat pocket. I didn't ask what it was. That afternoon, Marissa cornered me in the kitchen while my mother was upstairs. "So," she said casually, "have you thought about what you'll do long term?" I looked at her with what? She shrugged. "Life? You know, you don't have kids. You're not tied down here. Daniel has responsibilities." There it was, the justification. "I have a life," I said evenly. "I'm sure you do," she replied. "I just mean, some people build things. Others float." She smiled when she said it like it was a compliment. That night, back at my hotel, I didn't sleep. Not from anger, from clarity. They didn't hate me. They just didn't see me as essential. In January, my father had a minor health scare. Nothing serious. Chest pain that turned out to be stress. Daniel called me after the hospital visit. "Dad's fine," he said. But it made us realize how important it is to have everything settled. Everything I asked. The business, the house, authority, decision-making. And me, I asked, my voice calm. There was a pause, short, calculated. "You'll always be family," he said. That wasn't an answer. A week later, I got an email from my mother. She said they'd updated their will and everything was taken care of. She said they loved me and hoped I understood. No attachment, no explanation. That's when I stopped waiting. I asked Linda to formally request a copy of any documents where I was named. Not to contest, just to review. The response came back 2 days later. There were none. No assets, no shares, no contingency clauses, no trust provisions. I was mentioned once as a beneficiary of a small cash gift payable 6 months after both parents' deaths, contingent on maintaining a harmonious relationship with the family. I read that sentence 3 times. Maintaining a harmonious relationship, which meant silence, compliance, gratitude. I closed my laptop and sat there for a long time. It wasn't about money. Not really. It was about control. About making sure I stayed pleasant, quiet, non-threatening. Loved, but only if I behaved. I didn't call my parents. I didn't confront Daniel. Instead, I did something they would never expect. I stopped coming home. No Easter visit, no birthday trip, no casual drop-ins. I was busy. I had work. I had plans. At first, my mother called more often, then less. Daniel didn't call at all. The silence stretched, and in that space, something else began to surface. Because the more distance I had, the more I started to see patterns I'd ignored my entire life. The forgotten birthdays, The way my achievements were described as nice, while Daniel's were called important. The way my opinions were tolerated, but never acted on. This wasn't new. It was just finally undeniable. By March, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, it wouldn't involve asking for permission. And it wouldn't involve begging to be included in a family that only valued me when I stayed small. I didn't know yet how I'd take my power back, but I had stopped pretending I didn't need to. The distance didn't make me lonely. It made me observant. Once I stopped orbiting my family's gravity, things in my own life came into sharper focus. My job, my finances, the way I'd always kept one foot planted in case I needed to go back home quickly, like I was on standby for a role no one had officially given me. I worked as operations coordinator for a mid-sized nonprofit in Columbus. Not glamorous, not poorly paid either. I handled budgets, vendor contracts, compliance reports, the kind of work that only got noticed when something went wrong. I was good at it, quietly good. The kind of good that made other people's jobs look easier than they were. One Tuesday morning in April, my director Angela called me into her office. "Have you ever thought about moving into a senior operations role?" she asked. I hadn't, or rather I had, but not seriously. Advancement required visibility, and visibility had always made me uncomfortable. In my family, visibility came with expectations you couldn't decline. "I'm not sure," I said. "Well, I am," she replied. "We're expanding. New grants, new reporting requirements. I need someone I trust." Trust. The word landed differently than it used to. She slid a folder across the desk. It wasn't an offer yet, just a proposal, more responsibility, more authority. A seat at meetings I'd never been invited to before. I told her I'd think about it. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, papers spread across the table, and realized something unsettling. I'd been trained my entire life to wait for permission. From my parents, from my brother, from people who decided what I was allowed to want. And without that pressure, I didn't immediately know what to choose. So I did what felt safest. I gathered information. I accepted the promotion 2 weeks later. It came with a modest raise and a title change, but more importantly, it came with access. Board meetings, financial forecasts, long-term planning. I learned how decisions were actually made, how power moved quietly through emails and signatures instead of loud declarations. I was good at that too. Around the same time, my grandmother Helen Whitman started calling me. She was my father's mother, 84 years old, sharp-minded, lived alone in a smaller house about 20 minutes from my parents. She'd always been polite but distant when I was younger, more aligned with my father's world than mine. Now she called every Sunday afternoon. "You don't come around much anymore," she said one day. "I've been busy," I replied. "True, but incomplete." "So I hear," she said. "Your mother says you're overwhelmed." That made me pause. She said that. "That's what she always says when she doesn't know the real reason," Helen replied calmly. There was a silence between us. Not uncomfortable, measured. "Your brother's been making a lot of changes," she continued, talking like he already owns everything. I didn't respond. "He forgets," she said, "that your father didn't build that business alone." I looked at my phone, suddenly very alert. "What do you mean?" Helen sighed. "This isn't something your parents like to discuss." "Then why are you telling me?" "Because I'm old," she said. "And I don't have the energy for polite lies anymore." She told me about the early years, about my grandfather's small manufacturing operation, about how my grandmother had loaned my father the money to buy out a failing partner, about how the property the main warehouse sat on was still technically in her name. That land was never transferred, she said. I insisted on keeping it separate. In case of what I asked. In case people forgot who made things possible. I didn't know what to say. My family had never mentioned this. Not once. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked again. "Because I saw the new will," she said. My chest tightened. "You did. They brought it to me, Helen said, to sign off on a few trust dissolutions. They assumed I wouldn't read it carefully. And you were barely in it. There it was. Confirmation spoken plainly. I didn't sign, she said. I closed my eyes. What does that mean? It means nothing changes yet, Helen replied. But it also means I'm reconsidering some things. We ended the call shortly after that. She didn't promise anything. She didn't threaten anyone. She just stated facts. I sat there long after we hung up staring at the wall. I wasn't angry. I was alert. Over the next few weeks, I visited Helen more often. Quiet visits. Tea at her kitchen table. Long conversations about the past. About choices. About regret. She never spoke badly about my parents. She didn't need to. Her disappointment spoke for itself. One afternoon, while sorting old photographs, she mentioned something else. There's a trust, she said casually. Set up years ago, before Daniel was born. My heart skipped. What kind of trust? Educational and operational, she said. For family members who worked in or supported the business indirectly. That sounds vague. It was meant to be, she replied. Flexible. For people whose contributions weren't obvious. I swallowed. And where is it now? She looked at me over her glasses. Dormant. Untouched. Your father never activated it. Why not? Because activating it would mean acknowledging that the business relied on more than one kind of labor. The room felt smaller. I don't want anything from them, I said quietly. Helen nodded. That's good. Wanting justice and wanting revenge are different things. I don't want revenge, I said. I know, she replied. That's why you're dangerous. I laughed once, short and surprised. She reached across the table and patted my hand. You don't have to do anything right now. Just understand this. You were never powerless. You were just kept uninformed. That night, I lay in bed, thinking about locked cabinets and sealed envelopes, about how knowledge had always been treated like currency in my family, hoarded by those who already had enough. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I called Linda. I need to understand dormant trusts, I said. She didn't ask why. As spring turned into early summer, pieces began to line up. Not dramatically, quietly, like chess moves made in advance. Not for spectacle, but for position. My family still hadn't noticed. They would, just not yet. Because I wasn't ready to act. I was still gathering what they'd spent years making sure I never saw. By early June, I understood something I hadn't before. Power doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. Linda and I met on a Wednesday morning in her downtown office, the kind of place with frosted glass doors and neutral art meant to calm people before difficult conversations. She spread documents across the table, slowly, deliberately, like she wanted me to see not just the content, but the shape of what had been hidden. The trust your grandmother mentioned is real, she said. It was established 28 years ago. That timing wasn't accidental. It predated Daniel, predated the expansion, predated the version of the business everyone talked about now. It was funded initially with land equity, Linda continued. Not cash, property interests tied to operational infrastructure. The warehouse land, I said. She nodded. Part of it. Not all. There are also clauses tied to intellectual contribution. That sounds vague, I said. It's supposed to be, she replied. Your grandmother was careful. Careful was one word for it. What does dormant mean legally, I asked. It means inactive by choice, Linda said. The trustee never executed distribution conditions, which means the trust still exists, untouched, unchallenged. Who's the trustee? Linda looked at me. Your grandmother. I leaned back in my chair, breathing slowly. So my father couldn't dissolve it without her. Correct. And Daniel, he doesn't even know it exists, Linda said. At least, not officially. That afternoon, I went to see Helen again. She was in her garden hands, deep in soil, wearing an old sweater, with a tear at the elbow. "You found it," she said without looking up. "Yes." She stood, slowly wiped her hands, and sat at the patio table. "Then you know I wasn't exaggerating." "Why keep it from them?" I asked. "Because once people know a safety net exists," she said, "they stop behaving decently." She poured tea, her hands steady. "I wanted to see who they became without it." I thought of the new will, the exclusions, the conditions. "They failed," I said. "Yes," she replied. "They did. I didn't feel satisfaction, just confirmation." Over the next month, I watched my family from a distance. Daniel posted pictures on social media of new equipment purchases, smiling beside trucks with the company logo. My mother sent occasional texts, short, polite, surface level. "Miss you. Hope work is good." Nothing about coming home. In July, my father announced his partial retirement. Daniel was named acting president of Whitman & Sons. There was a small celebration at the house. I wasn't invited. "I heard about it from Helen." "They didn't think you'd want to come," she said flatly. "They didn't want me there," I corrected. She didn't argue. The following week, I got an email from Daniel. Subject line: paperwork clarification. It was brief, professional, almost friendly. "Hey, Claire, Dad mentioned you might have questions about estate stuff. Everything's been finalized, but if you need reassurance, we can talk. Hope you're well. Daniel." Reassurance. I forwarded it to Linda without replying. She called me within an hour. "He's nervous." "About what?" "About control," she said. "People get uneasy when they sense a variable they didn't account for." I didn't respond to Daniel. Silence had become a language I spoke fluently. Instead, I focused on my work. The promotion was stretching me in ways I liked. I was leading meetings, setting timelines, making decisions that had real impact. For the first time, I wasn't asking if I was allowed to. At the end of August, Helen had a fall. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to land her in the hospital overnight. I drove up immediately. My parents were there. Daniel, too. The atmosphere was tense, polite, in the way that meant everyone was measuring their words. Helen waved me over as soon as she saw me. "Sit," she said. "I need you." Daniel stiffened slightly. "I'm fine," she continued. "This is what happens when you live long enough to trip over your own garden hose." The doctor explained recovery would be slow. She'd need help, possibly assisted living, at least temporarily. My mother jumped in immediately. "We'll take care of everything." Helen looked at her. "No." The word was calm, final. "I'll decide that," she said. "And I've decided Claire will help me." The room went quiet. Daniel frowned. "Mom, I'm not discussing this," Helen said. "I'm still competent, and I want Claire." My mother smiled tightly. "Of course, if that's what you want." It was what she wanted, and for the first time, what Helen wanted mattered more than what kept the peace. Helen moved into a rehabilitation facility near my apartment. I visited daily. We talked about mundane things, books, the news, her memories of raising my father. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the room grew quiet, she said, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "When the time comes, don't soften the truth for them." I thought about that, about how often I'd done exactly that. "I won't," I said. She nodded. "Good. They'll call you cold, ungrateful, disloyal." "I know, but they won't call you wrong," she said. "Because you won't be." In September, Helen asked Linda to come by. The three of us sat at a small table, paperwork neatly arranged. "This isn't about punishment," Helen said. "It's about correction." She executed 2 documents that afternoon. One activated the dormant trust. The other amended her own will. I didn't read everything. I didn't need to. Linda looked at me, once eyebrows raised slightly. "Are you sure you want to proceed this way?" "Yes," I said. "Because this wasn't revenge. It was alignment." 2 weeks later, Daniel showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and saw his expression tight and unfamiliar. "We need to talk," he said. I know, I replied. He stepped inside, glanced around, like he was cataloging changes. What's going on with Grandma? He asked. She's not returning calls. She's recovering, I said. And she's choosing who she speaks to. His jaw clenched. You're influencing her. No, I said calmly. I'm listening to her. He stared at me, searching for something, guilt maybe. Uncertainty. You're making things difficult, he said. No, I replied. I'm no longer making things easy for you. The silence that followed was heavy, and for the first time I saw it in his eyes. He knew something was slipping out of his control. He just didn't know what yet. Neither did my parents. But they were about to find out. Because the next move wouldn't be mine alone, and once it was made, there would be no going back. The first official notice arrived on a Monday morning. Not to me, but to Daniel. I didn't see it. Of course, not at first. I only knew something had happened because my phone started vibrating at 8:12 a.m., then again at 8:14, then again at 8:17. I let it ring. By the time I answered on the fifth call, his voice was already tight. Did you know about this? He asked. About what I said. The trust, he snapped. The land. The review. Don't pretend. I leaned against the kitchen counter and took a breath. I know some things. You had no right, he said. This affects the business. So did excluding me, I replied. He exhaled sharply. This is different. It's not, I said. It just feels different because it's happening to you. The notice had come from a regional title firm. A routine review triggered by the activation of an old trust tied to operational property. Nothing accusatory, nothing dramatic, just a statement of fact. Ownership structures were being verified. Daniel hadn't expected that. Neither had my parents. My mother called an hour later. Her voice was calm, but brittle around the edges. Claire, there's been some confusion about what I asked. Your grandmother's decisions, she said carefully. Daniel is very upset. I'm aware, I said. She's been influenced, my mother continued. This isn't like her. I thought of Helen Sharp, eyed decisive signing documents with steady hands. She's exactly like herself, I said. My mother sighed. Why are you doing this? I considered that question. Not defensively, not emotionally, just honestly. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm responding to what she asked. To being removed, I replied. Quietly, systematically. That wasn't the intention, she said quickly. Intent doesn't change outcome, I said. Silence. Then, we thought you understood your role. There it was. My role, I repeated. Yes, she said. Daniel carries the business. You've always preferred other things. I preferred having choices, I said. You just never gave me any. She didn't respond. Over the next week, the pressure increased. Emails from the company's legal counsel requesting documentation. Calls from my father asking to talk things through. Messages from Marissa that tried to sound casual, but weren't. We should clear the air. Family is everything. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Linda again. They're going to try to negotiate, she said. Offer you a settlement, cash, maybe a small advisory role. I don't want either, I said. What do you want? I thought about that. I want my autonomy, I said. And I want them to stop pretending this was ever about fairness. She nodded. Then don't accept the first offer. The first offer came 3 days later. Daniel emailed me a proposal, a buyout, a lump sum in exchange for signing a waiver acknowledging the will is final and renouncing any future claims. It was generous enough to look reasonable. It was also a cage. I forwarded it to Linda. Her reply was short. Decline. I did. No explanation, no counter. That's when Daniel lost his composure. He showed up at Helen's rehabilitation facility, unannounced, demanding to speak to her. The staff called me. By the time I arrived, he was pacing the hallway, face flushed. You can't do this, he said as soon as he saw me. You're tearing the family apart. I didn't activate the trust, I said. She did. You're behind it, he insisted. You're manipulating her. Helen's door opened. Daniel, she said, voice steady. Stop embarrassing yourself. He turned to her, anger and disbelief colliding. Grandma, this is insane. You're putting the business at risk. The business survived before you, she said. It will survive after you. You're siding against your own son, he said. I'm correcting a mistake, she replied. And if you'd paid attention instead of assuming, you wouldn't be so surprised. I watched him deflate slightly, like someone realizing too late that shouting wouldn't help. You always favored her, he muttered. Helen looked at him. No, I held you accountable. He left without another word. That night my father called. Your brother's under a lot of stress, he said. I know, I replied. You could make this easier, he said. Just sign the waiver. I won't, I said. Why? He asked. What do you gain from this? I thought of the locked cabinet, the envelope, the scarf. I gain the truth, I said. And my silence back. He didn't understand that. He never would. The next escalation came quietly. A forensic audit, triggered by the trust's activation. The firm was required to examine historical property, use, lease agreements, and intercompany transfers. It wasn't personal. It was procedural. But procedure can expose things people forget they've done. Daniel called me again. This time, his voice was lower, controlled. They're digging into old records, he said. Decisions Dad made years ago. I know, I said. This could get messy, he said. It already is, I replied. There was a pause. What do you want, he asked. I thought carefully before answering. I want you to stop treating me like a problem to manage, I said, and start recognizing that I'm a stakeholder you ignored. He scoffed. You never worked in the business. No, I said. I just grew up around it, watched it, absorbed it, supported it without credit. That doesn't count, he said. It does when the trust says it does, I replied. He went quiet. By the end of September, the audit had uncovered irregularities. Nothing criminal, but sloppy. Assumptions made. Paperwork never finalized. Assets moved without proper documentation. Things that had gone unnoticed because no one had questioned authority. Until now, my parents stopped calling. Daniel stopped posting online. The house went quiet. And in that quiet, something shifted again. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to their moves. They were reacting to mine. And the next step wouldn't involve lawyers or documents. It would involve a decision they never expected me to make, one that would change where the power actually lived. The decision came to me in the most ordinary way. I was standing in line at a grocery store on a Thursday evening, holding a basket with bread, eggs, and soup, listening to a woman in front of me argue about a coupon that had expired 2 days earlier. It was mundane, predictable, life continuing at its usual pace. And I realized something. All the power my family had ever held over me came from proximity, access, availability, my willingness to show up, explain myself, smooth things over, make myself useful, so no one felt uncomfortable. I had already stepped away emotionally. Now I needed to step away structurally. That night, I called Linda. I want to separate completely, I said. No informal communication. No family back channels. She understood immediately. You're talking about formal boundaries. Yes, I said. Everything in writing. Through counsel. That will escalate things, she said. I know, I replied. That's the point. The next morning, she sent notices to my parents' attorney and to the company's legal counsel. Clear, polite, precise. All communication regarding the trust estate matters and any related negotiations would go through her office. No exceptions. My phone went silent. For 3 days, no calls, no texts, no emails slipping through. On the 4th day, my mother tried anyway. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded tired, strained in a way I'd never heard before. Claire, this has gone too far, she said. We don't even know how to talk to you anymore. I listened once. I didn't respond, because this wasn't about talking. It was about control slipping from their hands. The audit continued quietly in the background. Linda kept me updated, but only on facts, not speculation. I appreciated that. Facts were solid. Feelings were not. Then Helen's health declined again. Not suddenly, gradually. Her recovery plateaued. Doctors recommended transitioning to long-term care. I sat with her. The afternoon she made the decision. "I don't want to go back to the house," she said. "Too many ghosts." "I understand," I said. "I want you listed as my primary contact," she continued. "Medical, legal, everything." I hesitated for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "Your father will make decisions based on pride. Daniel will make them based on fear. You'll make them based on reality." That night, she signed a power of attorney. Temporary, revocable, specific. But it changed everything. Within a week, I was the one doctors called, the one facilities contacted, the one who signed intake paperwork. My parents were informed after the fact. My father's reaction came through Linda. He was upset, hurt, confused. But he didn't challenge it, because legally he couldn't. Daniel did challenge it. He filed an objection, claiming undue influence. It was denied. Helen had been evaluated independently. Her capacity was clear. Her intentions documented. The judge's ruling was brief. Objection dismissed. That was the moment I felt it. Not triumph, relief. Because something irreversible had happened. I was no longer reacting to my family's choices. I was making my own. The next move came from Daniel, though he didn't realize it. In his frustration, he made a mistake. He spoke too freely. During a meeting with the audit team, he referred to the warehouse land as company-owned, contradicting older documents that listed it as leased under favorable terms. The discrepancy triggered a deeper review, which uncovered a pattern. For years, Whitman and Sons had been benefiting from below-market lease terms, without formal renewal. Nothing illegal, but dependent on goodwill, on assumptions, on the belief that no one would ever question it. Now someone was. Linda called me as soon as the report came in. "This strengthens the trust's leverage," she said. "Significantly." "What does that mean in real terms?" I asked. "It means Daniel has to choose," she said. "Negotiate in good faith or risk operational disruption." I knew my brother well enough to know which option he'd resist. The call came that evening. Not from him, from my father. "I don't recognize this family anymore," he said, voice low. "I do," I replied. "I just stopped pretending it was something else." He sighed. "You're forcing us into corners." "No," I said. "I'm stepping out of them." Another silence. "Is this about money?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's about being treated like an adult with agency." He didn't respond. A week later, Daniel requested mediation. Formal, neutral, controlled. I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted clarity on record. The mediation was held in a conference room downtown. Glass walls, neutral tones, bottled water no one touched. Daniel sat across from me, my parents beside him, their attorney on one side, Linda on mine. He looked tired, older than he had a month earlier. "We need resolution," he said. "I agree," I replied. He outlined his position. The business needed stability. The trust complicated things. The family could reach a private arrangement. I listened, didn't interrupt. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly. "I'm not asking for control of the business," I said. "I'm asking for acknowledgement of my stake in the family assets that made it possible." "You never wanted this life," Daniel said. "You never asked," I replied. I slid a document across the table. Linda explained it. A proposal. The trust would lease the land at fair market value, retroactively adjusted over time. The proceeds would fund a separate entity, managed independently by me. Daniel stared at the numbers. "That's not reasonable," he said. "It's accurate," Linda replied. My mother looked at me, eyes searching. "You'd really do this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Because this wasn't punishment. It was structure. The mediator cleared his throat. "You'll need time to consider." Daniel nodded stiffly. As we stood to leave, he said quietly, "You're changing everything." I met his eyes. "No," I said. I'm just no longer letting you decide it all. Outside, the air felt lighter. I didn't know how they'd respond yet, but I knew something else. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what they might take from me, because I had already taken myself back. They didn't respond to the proposal right away. That silence wasn't uncertainty. It was calculation. I recognized it because I'd lived inside it my whole life. In my family, pauses were never empty. They were filled with private conversations, contingency plans, quiet alliances forming behind closed doors. Decisions made without the person being discussed in the room. Only this time, I was no longer waiting to be informed. Linda warned me. They'll try to reframe this, make it emotional, make it personal. I know, I said. They always do. The first attempt came through my mother. She asked if we could meet, just the two of us. No lawyers, no paperwork. Like adults, she said in the message. I agreed, but only on my terms. A public place. Limited time. We met at a cafe near the river neutral ground. She arrived early, already seated, hands folded around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked older than I remembered. Not frail, just tired in a way that came from carrying a story too long. This isn't who you are, she said as soon as I sat down. I didn't react. I waited. You were always the peacemaker, she continued. The reasonable one. That was a role, I said. Not a personality. Her mouth tightened. You're hurting your father. I didn't choose this. I replied. I responded to it. She shook her head slowly. Daniel feels attacked. I almost smiled at that. Almost. He excluded me from the will, I said. Without discussion. Without explanation. That wasn't an attack. That was different, she said quickly. That was practical. For him, I said. She leaned forward. What do you want, Claire? The question sounded sincere. It might even have been. I want boundaries that don't disappear when they're inconvenient, I said. I want decisions that affect me to stop being made without me. She exhaled. And if we give you more money, there it is, I said calmly. Her eyes flickered. This isn't about money, I continued. It's about agency. She stared at me for a long moment. You've changed. Yes, I said, because staying the same wasn't protecting me. She left shortly after that. Polite, controlled, unresolved. 2 days later, Daniel made his move. Not legally, strategically. He announced that Whitman and Sons would be hosting a large Christmas charity event at the family home. A tradition according to the press release. Community leaders, local politicians, donors. A public show of unity and goodwill. My phone lit up with messages from extended family. Did you hear about the event? Are you coming? Your parents must be so proud. The invitation arrived by mail. Formal, cream-colored paper. My name printed neatly, like nothing had changed. I understood immediately. This wasn't reconciliation. It was containment. If I showed up, smiled, played my part, the narrative would reset. The conflict would look resolved. My silence would be interpreted as agreement. If I didn't show up, I would be the problem. The ungrateful daughter. The one who broke tradition. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I called Linda. They're going public, I said. She nodded, already anticipating it. Then you need to decide whether you want to stay invisible. I don't, I said. That's when we prepared the next step. Not an accusation, not a threat. A disclosure. The audit findings were complete by mid-November. Linda helped me draft a formal summary, factual, and restrained, outlining the trust's position, the land lease discrepancies, and the proposed restructuring. We didn't send it to the company. We sent it to the board. Daniel didn't call this time. The board did. They requested a meeting. Without him, that was new. The meeting took place in a quiet office overlooking downtown. 4 board members. 2 of them I recognized from family events over the years. Men who'd patted my shoulder, asked about my work, then turned back to Daniel without waiting for an answer. Now they were listening. I didn't oversell anything. I didn't dramatize. I explained the trust, the land, the structural risks of continuing without proper agreements. One of them leaned back in his chair. Why now? Because now I have standing, I said. Another asked, what do you want from the company? I don't want control, I said again. I want separation. They exchanged glances. By the time I left, nothing had been decided. But something had shifted. Daniel found out that evening. He came to my apartment again. This time, he didn't knock. I opened the door to see him standing there, face flushed, jaw tight. You went to the board, he said. Yes, I replied. That was a betrayal, he snapped. No, I said. It was governance. You're humiliating us, he said. You did that when you thought I wouldn't notice, I replied. He stepped inside without being invited, looked around, took in the space like he was searching for leverage. You don't understand what you're risking, he said. This company is everything. To you, I said. He laughed sharp and bitter. You think you can just walk away and build something on your own? I already have, I said. He stopped laughing. What he asked, I hadn't planned to tell him, but I did. The trust income, I said. Once the lease is adjusted, I'm forming a small operations consulting firm. Nonprofit family business restructuring. Conflict remediation. His eyes narrowed. Using our mess to make money. Using my experience, I said. Which you dismissed. He stared at me silent now. You don't need to destroy us, he said finally. I'm not, I replied. I'm removing myself from a system that only works when I stay small. He left without another word. A week before the charity event, Linda called. They've agreed to renegotiate, she said. But there's a condition. I closed my eyes. Of course there is. They want you there, she said. At Christmas. Publicly. As a sign of unity. I thought about the house, the tree, the photographs that would be taken, the way my presence would be used to soften the story. And if I refuse, I asked. They'll stall, she said. Delay. Make things difficult. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, tell them I'll come. Linda paused. Are you sure? Yes, I said. Because I wasn't walking into that house to be absorbed back into silence. I was walking in with leverage, and they had no idea what I planned to say once I got there. The house looked the same. White siding, dark shutters, lights glowing warmly through the windows like nothing had ever cracked inside. Christmas wreath on the door, garland along the banister. The kind of careful decoration meant to signal stability. I arrived alone. No partner, no +1 buffer. Just me, standing on the porch with the cold pressing through my coat, listening to voices inside rise and fall in practiced cheer. When my mother opened the door, her smile was immediate and fragile. You came, she said. I said I would, I replied. She stepped aside. The smell of pine sugar cookies and roast meat washed over me. The living room was full. Board members, donors, city council types, people who'd watched me grow up and never learned who I was. Daniel stood near this fireplace, drink in hand, mid-conversation. When he saw me, his expression froze for half a second before he recovered. He walked over. You look well, he said. So do you, I replied. We didn't hug. My father approached next. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving, his posture more rigid, his voice softer. I'm glad you're here, he said. I know, I replied. That answer unsettled him. The evening unfolded the way these things always do. Polite laughter, compliments about the house, stories about the business's success, the careful performance of a family that worked. I stayed near the edge of conversations, observed, listened. At one point, Marissa cornered me near the kitchen. This is nice, she said, glancing around. Feels normal again. I met her eyes. Does it? She hesitated, then smiled tightly. You know what I mean. I do, I said. I just don't agree. She didn't push further. About an hour in, my father tapped his glass. He made a speech about community, about legacy, about gratitude. The kind of speech designed to reassure everyone in the room that everything was under control. Then he gestured to me. And of course, he said, "We're grateful to have our daughter Claire here tonight." All eyes turned to me. I felt the moment stretch. This was the pivot they were counting on. The nod, the smile, the unspoken agreement to let the story end there. I stepped forward. "Thank you," I said. The room quieted. I wasn't sure I'd come tonight. I continued. Not because I don't care about this family, but because for a long time, I wasn't sure this family cared about hearing me. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I grew up in this house," I said. "I watched this business grow. I watched decisions get made quietly, behind closed doors, in ways that shaped all of our lives." I paused, let the silence hold. "For a long time, I believed love meant compliance," I said. "Staying agreeable, not asking difficult questions." My mother's face paled. "But I've learned something over the past year." I continued. "Being included isn't the same as being valued." The air felt heavy now. "I'm here tonight because I believe in transparency," I said. "And because I believe families and businesses both function better when things are clear." Daniel stepped forward. "Claire," I raised a hand slightly. Not aggressive, just firm. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to acknowledge reality." I turned to the room. "There are ongoing legal and structural discussions regarding Whitman and Sons and the assets that support it," I said. "Those discussions are being handled appropriately, professionally, with respect for everyone involved." I looked back at my father. "And I want to be clear," I said. "I didn't create this situation. I responded to it." The silence was complete now. I finished quietly. "Thank you for listening." I stepped back. No applause, no confrontation, just the sound of someone clearing their throat, glasses clinking again tentatively. The performance resumed, but the tone had changed. People avoided Daniel's eyes. Conversations shifted. The word transparency lingered like a scent no one could ignore. I stayed another 20 minutes, long enough for it to be clear I wasn't fleeing. Then I said my goodbyes. My father stopped me near the door. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I did." Outside, the air was sharp and clean. I breathed deeply for the first time that evening. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Linda. "Board meeting tomorrow morning, urgent." I drove home slowly, the house receding in my rearview mirror. I knew what I'd done. I'd broken the illusion. And once illusions break, people have to decide what's real. The next morning, I sat across from the board again. This time, Daniel wasn't invited. They'd reviewed the trust proposal, the audit, the optics of the situation. One of them spoke carefully. "We need to protect the company." "I agree," I said. "Which means," he continued, "we need to reduce dependency on unresolved family dynamics." I waited. "We're prepared to approve the lease restructuring," he said, "and to support the formation of your separate entity." There it was. No drama, no victory speech, just a decision. I signed the agreement that afternoon, not with shaking hands, with clarity. By the time Christmas morning came, the papers were filed. The trust was active. The new lease in effect. Daniel didn't call. My parents didn't invite me back. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. Because I wasn't excluded anymore. I was independent. And the final step was still ahead. One that would make sure this separation stayed permanent. Independence is quieter than people imagine. There was no rush of adrenaline the morning after Christmas. No sense of triumph. I woke up in my apartment, made coffee, answered emails. Life continued. That was the point. The papers were filed. The lease restructuring was active. The trust was no longer theoretical. It existed on balance sheets now. Not just in conversations people hoped would fade. Daniel finally called 3 days later. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. Controlled. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. I didn't return the call. Instead, I met with Linda and the accountant. She'd recommended a woman named Janice Holt, who specialized in family business separations. She didn't waste time on sentiment. "You've done the hardest part already," she said. "Now you decide how clean you want the break to be." "What are my options?" I asked. Janice slid a document across the table. "You can remain a passive beneficiary of the trust, collect lease income, minimal involvement. And the other option, you formalize distance," she said. "Convert the trust's interests into a fixed-term commercial arrangement with exit clauses. No emotional leverage, no future renegotiations." I understood immediately. One option left the door open. The other closed it gently but permanently. "I want the second," I said. Linda glanced at me. "That will feel cold to them." "It already does," I replied. "I'm just making it honest." The restructuring took 2 weeks. Amendments, valuations, clear language that left no room for interpretation. The trust would lease the land to Whitman and Sons for a defined term at fair market rates, with scheduled reviews handled by third parties. No family mediation, no informal extensions. Predictability over permission. When Daniel received the finalized terms, he showed up again, this time at my office. He waited in the lobby like a stranger. I agreed to see him for 10 minutes. He sat across from me, hands clasped tightly, eyes scanning the room like he was trying to understand who I'd become. "You're cutting us out," he said. "I'm stepping away," I replied. "You're profiting off the company," he said. "I'm charging rent for land the company doesn't own," I said. "Those aren't the same thing." He leaned forward. "You're punishing us." "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting myself." His voice dropped. "Mom's not taking this well." I didn't respond. "Dad barely speaks," he continued. "He thinks you've chosen money over family." I looked at him then. Really looked. "You chose control over connection," I said. "I chose clarity." "That's not how they'll see it," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's not my responsibility anymore." He shook his head slowly. "You've changed." "Yes," I said again, "because staying the same almost cost me myself." He stood abruptly. "You don't need to be so final about this." "I do," I said, "because if I leave even a crack, you'll use it." That landed. He didn't deny it. He left without another word. A week later, my mother sent a letter. Handwritten, 3 pages, apologetic in tone, but careful in content. She acknowledged misunderstandings, hurt feelings, poor communication. She did not acknowledge exclusion. She did not acknowledge control. She asked if we could start fresh. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Starting fresh only works when both sides admit what ended the last version. In February, Helen passed away. Quietly, in her sleep. No drama, no unfinished business. I was the one who got the call. I was also the one who handled arrangements. The funeral was small, private, no speeches about legacy. Just a simple service, the way she'd wanted it. Daniel sat 3 rows ahead of me, my parents beside him. We didn't speak. Afterward, the attorney read the will. Helen had been precise. Her personal effects were distributed evenly. No surprises there. But the remainder of her estate, including her remaining interest in the trust, passed to me. Not because she favored me, because, as her letter stated, Claire understands the difference between stewardship and entitlement. No one argued. They couldn't. The following week, I received notice that Whitman and Sons had accepted the final lease terms. They didn't have a choice. Operational dependency has a way of clarifying priorities. My consulting firm took shape faster than I expected. Word traveled quietly. Family businesses in similar situations reached out. Sisters, daughters, sons who'd been sidelined, minimized, asked to stay quiet for the sake of harmony. I didn't sell revenge. I sold structure, boundaries, governance, exit strategies. I told them the truth. If a system only works when you stay silent, it's not a system. It's a trap. One afternoon in March, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was my father. "I don't know how to talk to you anymore," he said. "You can start by listening," I replied. He sighed. "I thought I was protecting the family." "You were protecting an image," I said. "At my expense." Another silence. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "I thought about that." "You might not be able to," I said. "And that has to be okay." He didn't argue. When we hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, acceptance. Because some relationships don't end in reconciliation. They end in clarity. And clarity, I was learning, was its own kind of peace. The final phase was approaching. Not a confrontation, a conclusion. One that would make sure the patterns I escaped could never reach me again. The hardest part wasn't walking away. It was staying gone. Once Helen's estate settled and the lease terms were finalized, the legal conflict quieted. No more urgent emails. No surprise visits. No pressure disguised as concern. On the surface, it looked like resolution. But absence has a way of revealing what noise once covered. Without the constant tension, memories surfaced differently. Not sharper, just clearer. I noticed how often I'd been the one to call first, to smooth things over, to apologize, even when I hadn't caused the problem. I noticed how peace in my family had always depended on my flexibility, never theirs. That pattern didn't disappear just because paperwork changed. In April, my mother invited me to lunch. "Just lunch," she said. "No agenda." I agreed against my better judgment. Not because I hoped for reconciliation, but because I wanted to see who she was when there was nothing left to negotiate. We met at a quiet restaurant halfway between our cities. She arrived early again. Same posture, same careful smile. "You look tired," she said. "I'm busy," I replied. "That's not the same thing," she said softly. We ordered. Small talk followed. Weather, traffic, mutual acquaintances. Then she leaned forward. "Your father's been struggling," she said. "He feels like he failed you." I waited. "He doesn't understand why you won't just come home," she continued. "Why you keep everything so formal." "I'm not keeping things formal," I said. "I'm keeping them safe." She frowned. "Safe from us?" "Yes," I said. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She rarely did. Tears had never been her tool. "We did what we thought was best," she said. "For the family, for the hierarchy," I corrected. She stiffened. "You're being unfair." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being accurate." She sighed. "What would it take for you to let this go?" I thought carefully before answering. "It would take accountability," I said. "Not regret, not sadness. Accountability. For what she asked. For excluding me," I said. "For deciding my place without asking. For assuming I'd accept whatever you gave me because I always had before." She looked down at her hands. "That wasn't our intention," she said. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it dangerous." We finished lunch politely. No agreement, no rupture. When we stood to leave, she reached for my arm. "I hope you don't regret this," she said. I met her gaze. "I already regret what I tolerated." That was the last time we met alone. In May, my firm landed its first major contract. A third-generation family manufacturing company in Indiana. The youngest daughter had been excluded from ownership discussions after returning from business school. She didn't want to sue. She wanted structure. I helped her design it, not to win, to survive intact. That night, I realized something else. I wasn't just building a business. I was building a firewall between who I was and who my family needed me to be to feel comfortable. The next attempt to breach it came unexpectedly. Daniel emailed me. Subject line Thanksgiving. One word. I stared at it for a long time before opening. "We're hosting again this year. Smaller. Just family. Dad wants you there." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an invitation framed as obligation. I forwarded it to Linda. She replied with a question. "Do you want to go?" I sat with that. Thanksgiving had always been a stage. The table, the seating, the stories retold in ways that reinforced who mattered most. I imagined myself there again. The careful conversations, the unspoken rules. I typed a response to Daniel. No, nothing else. He replied within minutes. That's it. Yes. Silence followed. In June, I took another step I'd been avoiding. I changed my emergency contact. It had always been my mother. I replaced it with a close friend. Someone who knew me as I was now, not as I'd been trained to be. That felt more final than any legal document. Late one evening, as I was closing my laptop, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was Marissa. I know you don't want to hear from me, she said quickly. But I need to say something. I waited. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. I thought you'd accept the settlement and things would go back to normal. There is no normal, I said. She exhaled. Daniel's angry all the time now. He blames you. I know, I replied. He says you turned everyone against him. I didn't, I said. He did that himself. There was a pause. I admired you, she said quietly. I just didn't think you'd ever stop playing along. That was the closest thing to honesty I'd heard from her. I didn't either, I said. When the call ended, I sat there in the dark, listening to the city outside my window. I felt tired, but steady, because I wasn't managing anyone's emotions anymore. I wasn't explaining myself into smaller shapes. I wasn't waiting for approval that would never come. The final step was already taking shape. Not a dramatic one. A simple, irreversible one. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but changes everything. The last step didn't feel like revenge. It felt like paperwork. That's how I knew it was right. In July, my accountant flagged something during a routine review of my personal finances. Nothing alarming. Just a pattern I hadn't paid attention to before. For years, my parents had listed me as a contingent beneficiary on a small family insurance policy. Not significant money, not symbolic either. Just another quiet tether. Another reason they could tell themselves I was still included. I hadn't asked to be on it. I hadn't known I still was. Do you want to stay on this? My accountant asked. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No, I said. The paperwork to remove myself was simple. One form, one signature. No confrontation required. When the confirmation email arrived, I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the last shared thread I hadn't consciously cut. A week later, I received notice that Whitman & Sons had formally restructured its board. 2 long-standing members retired. 1 new independent director was appointed, someone with no family ties. Daniel was no longer acting president. He kept his title, his salary, his pride intact on the surface. But the authority had shifted. I heard about it from a mutual contact, not from him. In August, my consulting firm officially incorporated. Clean documents, clear mission, no family overlap. The first public announcement went live on a Tuesday morning. By noon, I had 6 inquiries. By the end of the week, 12. Most of them used the same language. Excluded, overlooked, told to be grateful. I didn't encourage bitterness. I didn't fuel anger. I gave them options. Late one evening, my father showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly slumped. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just human. I won't stay long, he said. I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't sit, just stood near the window, looking out at the street. I don't recognize my family anymore, he said again. I do, I replied. I just see it clearly now. He nodded slowly. I never meant to push you out. I know, I said. You just never noticed when it happened. That landed. He turned to me. Your brother thinks you planned all of this. I didn't, I said. I adapted. He sighed. You always were good at that. Silence settled between us. Not hostile, not warm, just honest. I don't know how to fix this, he said. I'm not asking you to, I replied. He looked surprised. You're not? No, I said. I'm asking you to accept it. He considered that. When did you stop needing us? He asked. I thought about the locked cabinet, the scarf, the conditions. When I realized Love that requires silence isn't love, I said. He swallowed. Your mother won't understand. She doesn't have to, I said. She just has to stop trying to manage me. He nodded once. Before he left, he said something unexpected. I'm proud of you, he said. Not for what you did to us, but for standing still when we tried to move you. After he left, I sat on the floor for a long time, not crying, letting something settle. In September, Daniel sent one final message. No subject line. I didn't think you'd really go through with it. I thought you'd come back. I read it once. Then I archived it, because the truth was simple. I hadn't left to make a point. I'd left to stop disappearing. And the last chapter wasn't about them understanding that. It was about me never forgetting it. The quiet that comes after a long conflict isn't empty. It's spacious. By the time October settled in my life, had a rhythm that no longer revolved around anticipating someone else's reaction. Mornings were mine. Decisions were mine. Silence, when it came, wasn't punishment. It was peace. I moved to a new apartment across town. Nothing dramatic. Just a place that didn't carry memories I hadn't chosen. New walls, new routines. No spare key given to anyone out of obligation. On the day I signed the lease, I didn't tell my family. I didn't need to. My firm grew steadily, not explosively, but deliberately. I took on clients I believed in. I turned down ones who wanted vengeance, dressed up as justice. I'd learned the difference the hard way. One afternoon, a woman about my age sat across from me, hands clenched tightly in her lap. They keep saying it's for my own good, she said, that I should be grateful. I nodded. They always do. What if I lose them? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes, I said carefully, what you lose is only access to you. And that's not the same as losing love. She exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. That night, I thought about my own family. We still existed in each other's orbit, technically. Occasional updates passed through extended relatives, neutral news, health, weather, the company. Daniel stayed where he was, not rising, not falling, contained. My parents settled into a quieter version of their life. Fewer gatherings, fewer declarations about legacy. They didn't reach for me anymore, and I didn't reach back. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke up early and made coffee. The city was quiet. No rush, no performance. I cooked for myself, ate slowly, took a walk. At some point, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Riley. I don't know if you remember me. I used to work summers at Whitman & Sons. You helped me once when I messed up an order. I just wanted to say thank you. I quit last month. Found something better. I stared at the message for a long time. I replied simply, I'm glad you did. That was enough. In December, my firm closed for 2 weeks. I traveled alone. Not far, just somewhere quiet. I sat in cafes, read books, let myself be unproductive without guilt. One evening, as I watched lights come on across the street, I realized something had changed in a way I hadn't fully acknowledged yet. I no longer felt the need to explain myself, not to justify distance, not to soften boundaries, not to make my choices more palatable. The need to be understood had faded, and with it, the power it gave other people over me. The final paperwork arrived just before the end of the year. The trust's exit clauses were fully executed, automatic renewals removed, third-party oversight in place. Permanent. I signed the last document without ceremony. When I closed the folder, that chapter was done. No speech, no confrontation, no dramatic goodbye, just a line drawn clearly where it should have been all along. I thought about Helen then, about what she'd said months earlier. Some people confuse access with love. She'd been right. Love that requires you to shrink isn't love. It's control with better manners. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. You don't need to be loud to take your power back. You don't need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And you don't need permission to choose yourself, even when the people you love don't like the choice. Especially then, if you're listening to this and something in it feels familiar, pay attention to that feeling. It's not anger, it's recognition. And recognition is often the first step toward freedom. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like, comment, or share where you're listening from. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone in them. And if you want to hear more stories about boundaries, betrayal karma, and what happens when the tables are finally turned, subscribe and stay with me. Some chapters end quietly, but the life that follows can be louder than you ever imagined.